At 2:11 a.m. on April 19, 2020, Marcus Webb watched himself walk up to his own front door, key in hand, and enter his house in Raleigh, North Carolina. He watched the footage on his phone from a hotel room in Greensboro, 203 miles away. The doorbell camera notification had woken him. The motion sensor worked perfectly. The timestamp was accurate. The figure on the screen wore his jacket, his shoes, walked with his gait, and used his key. Marcus called the police at 2:14 a.m. When officers arrived at his address 22 minutes later, they found the front door locked from the inside, every window secured, and no one home. The alarm system showed no breach, but someone had been inside. The kitchen light was on. A glass of water sat on the counter, still cold. And upstairs, in Marcus's bedroom, the bed had been slept in. One side, his side. The sheets were still warm. I'm telling you this because Marcus Webb was my neighbor for 8 months before this happened, and because what I'm about to walk you through isn't just his story. It's a case file that ended up involving 14 people, 5 law enforcement agencies, and a digital forensics team from the FBI's Charlotte field office. None of them could explain what happened. Most of them won't talk about it. But I will, because I was there for parts of it. And because the alternative is pretending that reality doesn't sometimes fold in ways we're not supposed to see. Marcus was 31, worked as a medical software consultant, and had moved to Raleigh in late 2019 after his company opened a regional office near Research Triangle Park. He rented a small 2-story house on Oberlin Road, one of those quiet streets where the trees meet overhead and people still walk their dogs after dinner. The house was built in the 70s, wood siding painted a faded blue, with a narrow front porch and a detached garage out back that Marcus never used because his car barely fit and the door stuck. He lived alone. No pets. His ex-girlfriend had kept the dog when they split in Durham the year before. He was the kind of person who kept his space minimal, almost impersonal. Kia furniture, laptop on the kitchen table, a single plant by the window that was usually half dead. He traveled for work about twice a month, usually just overnights to client sites in Charlotte, Greensboro, Winston-Salem. Nothing unusual. He wasn't lonely exactly, but he was alone, and there's a difference. I lived 4 houses down. We talked sometimes when we both happened to be getting mail or taking out trash. He seemed fine, normal. Maybe a little tired the way everyone looked in early 2020, that specific exhaustion of living through something nobody had words for yet. The pandemic had just locked everything down. The streets were quieter than they'd ever been. You noticed sounds more. You noticed when things were different. Marcus had installed the doorbell camera in February, right after someone's car got broken into 2 streets over. It was one of those standard Ring models, motion-activated night vision, stores footage in the cloud. He mentioned it once, said it made him feel better when he traveled, that he could check in and make sure no one was messing with his porch or stealing packages. Simple peace of mind. The kind of thing thousands of people have. It recorded everything. Delivery drivers, neighbors walking past, cats, wind moving the bushes, headlights from passing cars. Marcus told me he mostly ignored the notifications unless he was expecting something. On April 18th, Marcus drove to Greensboro for a site visit at a hospital that was upgrading their patient record system. It was supposed to be a day trip, but the meeting ran late, and his supervisor suggested he stay over and finish the walkthrough in the morning rather than drive back tired. Marcus checked into a Hampton Inn off I-40 around 9:30 p.m. He grabbed takeout from a Panera in the same parking lot, ate in his room, and worked on his laptop until a little after midnight. He remembers watching part of a movie he'd seen before, something with Tom Hanks, just background noise. He texted his mom goodnight at 12:47 a.m. Phone records confirmed this. He plugged his phone in on the nightstand, turned off the TV, and went asleep. The hotel's keycard system logged him entering his room at 9:41 p.m. and recorded no further door activity until 6:18 a.m. the next morning when he left for breakfast. There is no record of him leaving the building. The parking lot camera showed his car, a gray Honda Accord, in the same spot all night. At 2:11 a.m. his phone buzzed. He woke up groggy, the way you do when a notification pulls you out of deep sleep and you're not sure for a second where you are. He picked up the phone, squinted at the screen. Ring notification, motion detected at front door. He almost dismissed it. He was tired and it was probably just a raccoon or someone's cat, but something made him open the app. Maybe instinct. Maybe the same reason you sometimes check the locks twice before bed, even though you know you already did. Video loaded. 6 seconds of footage, crystal clear in the infrared night vision glow. A figure approached from the left side of the frame, walking up the 3 steps to the porch. The motion was smooth, unhurried. The person wore a dark jacket, Marcus's North Face jacket. He recognized it immediately, and jeans and white sneakers. The figure's face was angled down slightly, but as they reached the door, they lifted their head just enough. Marcus saw his own face. Not similar. Not someone who looked like him. His face. The exact slope of his jaw, the way his hair fell, the particular way he held his shoulders slightly uneven because of an old baseball injury. The figure pulled keys from a pocket, the same keychain Marcus had left on the hotel dresser 6 feet away from where he was sitting up in bed. The figure unlocked the door. The video ended as the door opened inward. Marcus stared at the screen. He watched it again, then a third time. His hands started shaking, that full-body tremor that comes from adrenaline hitting your system all at once. He checked the timestamp. 2:11:03 a.m. He looked at the hotel room around him. The digital clock on the TV stand read 2:13. He looked at his keys on the dresser. He touched his jacket hanging on the chair. He was here. He was absolutely, physically here in Greensboro. But the video showed him. Showed his body, his face, his movements at his house in Raleigh. He called 911 at 2:14 a.m. The dispatcher asked him to repeat himself twice. I've heard the audio. His voice is shaky, but he's trying to stay calm, trying to explain in a way that sounds rational. Someone just entered my house, he said. I have video. I'm not there, I'm in Greensboro, but someone used my key and went inside. I need officers to check my house. The dispatcher confirmed his address, confirmed he wasn't on the property, and put out the call. Raleigh PD dispatch sent 2 units at 2:16 a.m. Officers Valdez and Chen arrived at 2:36 a.m. Their bodycam footage is part of the file. The street was dark, quiet, no cars moving. The porch light was off, the way Marcus always left it because the bulb had burned out a week earlier and he kept forgetting to replace it. They approached with flashlights, calling out standard announcements. The front door was locked. They checked windows, all secured. No signs of forced entry. No lights on inside except, and Chen noticed this first, you can hear it on the recording, a faint glow from the back of the house, probably the kitchen. They called for Marcus's permission to enter, which he gave over the phone. He also gave them his alarm code, but when they opened the door, the alarm didn't sound. It wasn't armed. Marcus always armed it when he left town. Always. It was automatic for him, the same way you lock your car. He'd armed it before leaving for Greensboro that morning. He was certain. The officers entered. The house was still. They cleared the ground floor first. Living room, kitchen, half bathroom, nothing disturbed. But in the kitchen the overhead light was on, the switch flipped up, and on the counter next to the sink there was a drinking glass half full of water. Chen touched it with the back of his hand. Cold, fresh. They looked at each other. Valdez called up the stairs, announced themselves again. No response. They went up. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. The first bedroom was empty. Marcus used it for storage. The bathroom was dark, untouched. The main bedroom door was open. They stepped inside. The bed was unmade, which wasn't unusual. Marcus had left in a hurry that morning. But the sheets on the right side, the side Marcus slept on, were disturbed in a way that looked recent. Not just unmade, slept in. The pillow had a depression. Valdez put his hand near the mattress. He didn't touch it at first, just hovered his palm over the sheet. Then he pressed down lightly. You can hear him say it on the bodycam audio. It's warm. Chen stepped closer. You sure? Yeah, feel it. Chen touched the sheet. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Then Valdez keyed his radio and requested a supervisor and a detective. Marcus was still on the phone with dispatch patched through to the officers. He asked what they'd found. Valdez told him the house was clear, no one inside, but that there were signs someone had been there. He didn't specify what signs. Not yet. He told Marcus to stay where he was, that a detective would call him. Detective Sarah Lim arrived at 3:20 a.m. She'd been on call, pulled out of sleep just like Marcus. She walked through the house with Valdez and Chen, listened to their observations, examined the glass of water, the light, the bed. She stood in the bedroom for a long time just looking. Then she asked them to pull the doorbell footage and any other camera evidence from neighboring houses. She also requested the hotel confirm Marcus's location and provide any surveillance footage showing him in Greensboro. She didn't say it out loud yet, but you could see the shape of what she was thinking. Either Marcus was lying about being in Greensboro, or something had happened that didn't fit. At 4:10 a.m., Detective Lim called Marcus. She asked him to send her the doorbell video directly. He did right there over email while they were still on the phone. She watched it on her laptop, 6 seconds. A figure that looked exactly like Marcus Webb entering his own house. She asked him if he'd given anyone a key. No. If anyone else had access to his alarm code. No. If he had a twin or a sibling who resembled him. No, only child. She asked if there was any way he could have driven back to Raleigh and returned to Greensboro without the hotel noticing. He said no, and his voice cracked a little when he said it because he could hear the suspicion in her question. He told her to check with the hotel, check his car, check highway cameras. He didn't leave. He didn't move. Lim said she'd follow up and ended the call. She stood in Marcus's kitchen, looking at that glass of water, and made a decision that probably saved this case from being written off as a hoax or a breakdown. She called the Greensboro Police Department and asked them to send a unit to the Hampton Inn to verify Marcus's presence and secure surveillance footage immediately, before anything could be erased or recorded over. GPD had an officer at the hotel by 4:55 a.m. Officer Ramos knocked on Marcus's door, confirmed his identity, and reviewed the hotel's camera system with the night manager. The footage was clear. Marcus's car arrived at 9:34 p.m. and didn't move. The lobby camera showed Marcus checking in. The hallway camera on his floor showed him entering his room at 9:41 p.m. and not emerging until 6:18 a.m., when he walked down to the breakfast area in the same clothes he'd gone to sleep in, looking exhausted and pale. There was no way Marcus Webb had been in Raleigh at 2:11 a.m. But someone had. If you're still listening, you already understand why this is the kind of story people don't talk about. Because once you accept the evidence, once you see what the cameras saw, you have to start considering possibilities that shouldn't exist. And most people aren't ready for that. Most people will find a way to dismiss it, explain it away, protect themselves from the idea that the world isn't as solid as they need it to be. Detective Lim spent the rest of that night and the following day trying to find a logical explanation. She pulled neighboring doorbell and security camera footage. 3 houses on Oberlin Road had cameras. None of them showed anyone approaching Marcus's house before 2:11 a.m. One camera belonging to a house directly across the street should have captured anyone walking up from the sidewalk. It showed nothing, just an empty street. But it also had a 4-minute gap in its recording between 2:09 and 2:13 a.m., which the homeowner couldn't explain. The system didn't log any error or power interruption. The footage just skipped. Lim requested Marcus's phone records. His location services showed him in Greensboro all night, pinging off cell towers along I-40 and near the hotel. No movement. She requested his credit card transactions. Nothing. She checked traffic cameras along the route between Greensboro and Raleigh. No sign of his vehicle. The doorbell video was sent to a digital forensics analyst at the Wake County Sheriff's Office. They examined it for signs of tampering, deepfake manipulation, editing. The file metadata was clean. The timestamp matched Ring server logs. The video was original, unaltered, uploaded in real time from Marcus's doorbell camera at 2:11:07 a.m. on April 19, 2020. The analyst wrote in his report, "No evidence of digital manipulation. Video appears authentic." Unable to identify source of anomaly. Anomaly. That was the word they used when they couldn't say what it actually was. Marcus drove back to Raleigh late morning on the 19th. He'd barely slept. He told me later that he sat in that hotel room until the sun came up, just staring at the video, watching himself over and over. He said it was like looking into a mirror that showed you 5 seconds in the past, except the past was wrong. When he finally got home around noon, there were still police at his house. They'd cordoned off nothing, but Detective Lim was there, along with a crime scene tech who was fingerprinting the kitchen and the bedroom. Marcus stood in his own doorway feeling like an intruder. Lim asked him to walk her through his usual routine, where he kept things, what should or shouldn't be out of place. The glass in the kitchen. He didn't recognize it at first, but then he did. It was from a set he'd gotten from Target, but he'd broken 2 of them the month before and only had 4 left. He kept them in the cabinet above the sink. Someone had taken one down, filled it with tap water, and left it on the counter. The water level was exactly halfway. Not a detail that means anything on its own, but it was specific, deliberate. The bedroom. Marcus stood at the foot of his bed and looked at the depression in the pillow, the way the sheet was pulled back on one side. He couldn't articulate it at first, but something about it felt wrong beyond the obvious. Then he realized the sheet was pulled back the same way he pulled it back when he got into bed. Not dramatically, not carelessly, but folded down in a neat triangle, the way he did every night without thinking, because his mom had taught him to make beds that way as a kid, and the habit stuck. Someone had replicated his unconscious routine. The tech lifted fingerprints from the glass, the kitchen light switch, the bedroom doorknob, the nightstand. They all came back as Marcus's, his own fingerprints, not similar, not close. His, identical ridge patterns, identical markers. The report stated it clearly. The prints belonged to Marcus Webb with a certainty of 100%. No forensic expert would testify otherwise. But Marcus's hands had been in Greensboro. Lim sat him down at his kitchen table that afternoon. She asked the question she had to ask. Is there any possibility you drove back here, entered your house, and don't remember doing it? Any history of sleepwalking, dissociation, medical episodes? Marcus said no, he'd never sleepwalked in his life. No mental health conditions, no medications that caused blackouts, no head injuries. He didn't drink. He'd been exhausted but not impaired. He remembered the whole night. He could account for every hour. He said to her, "I know what you're thinking and I thought it too, but I didn't leave that hotel. I couldn't have. It's not possible." Lim didn't argue with him, but he could see she didn't know what else to consider. She asked if he wanted to stay somewhere else for a few days, maybe with a friend or family. He said no. This was his house. He wasn't going to be scared out of it. But I think the truth was he needed to be there, needed to see if it would happen again, because the not knowing was worse than the fear. That first night back, April 19th into the 20th, Marcus didn't sleep. He sat in his living room with every light on, his phone in his hand, the Ring app open, watching the live feed from his own front door. He told me later that he kept expecting to see himself walk up to the door from the inside, to watch himself exit his house and vanish into the street. But nothing happened. The street stayed empty. The hours passed. At some point near dawn, he fell asleep on the couch, and when he woke up, it was 9 a.m. and the sun was coming through the windows and everything looked aggressively normal. He went to work. He tried to keep his routine. His coworkers noticed he looked tired. But that wasn't unusual for April 2020. Everyone looked tired. He didn't tell anyone what had happened except his supervisor, and only because he needed to explain why the police might call asking about his travel schedule. His supervisor was understanding but clearly skeptical. Marcus could hear it in the silence after he finished explaining. That particular pause that means someone is trying to figure out how to respond to something they don't believe. For 3 days, nothing happened. No strange videos, no evidence of intrusion, no anomalies. The doorbell camera recorded the usual: a delivery truck, a jogger passing by, a dog sniffing the porch steps. Marcus started to wonder if maybe it had been some kind of equipment glitch, a corrupted video file that pulled his image from an earlier recording and stitched it into the wrong timestamp. He knew that didn't make sense technically, but it was easier to believe than the alternative. On April 23rd at 3:34 a.m., Marcus woke to another notification. Motion detected at front door. His heart stopped. He grabbed his phone, opened the app. The video loaded, same thing, 6 seconds, a figure approaching from the left. The same jacket, the same walk, the same face, the same keys, the door opening. The video cut off. Marcus was in his bed, upstairs in his house. He wasn't in Greensboro. He was home, which meant whoever that was on the video was outside his house right now. He didn't move for a moment. He listened. The house was silent. No sound of the door opening downstairs, no footsteps. He looked at the timestamp on the video. 3:34:17 a.m. He looked at his phone's clock. 3:35 a.m. 1 minute ago. His bedroom door was open. The hallway was dark. He could see the top of the stairs from his bed, the dim shape of the railing. He got up slowly, quietly. He didn't turn on the light. He grabbed the aluminum baseball bat he kept in his closet, something he hadn't touched since moving in, and moved toward the hallway. Every step felt like it took an hour. He reached the stairs and looked down into the darkness of the ground floor. Nothing. No light from the kitchen. No sound. He descended one step at a time, his breath loud in his ears, the bat raised. He reached the bottom. The front door was closed, locked. The deadbolt was engaged from the inside, the way he'd left it before going to bed. He turned on the lights. Living room clear, kitchen clear. He checked the back door, the windows, everything locked. He went back upstairs, checked the closets, the bathroom. Nothing. No one. But the video was there on his phone. He watched it again. The figure opened the door. The door opened inward. The video ended. The figure had entered, but there was no one here, and the door had been locked. He called Detective Lim at 3:47 a.m. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice rough with sleep. He told her it happened again. She asked if he was safe, if anyone was in the house. He said no, he'd checked. She said she'd come by in the morning to not touch anything, to try to get some rest. He almost laughed at that. Rest. Lim arrived at 8:30 a.m. with the same crime scene tech from before. They processed the front door, the entryway, the kitchen again. No new fingerprints. No sign of forced entry. No sign that anyone had been inside. But Marcus insisted on checking something. He pulled up the Ring app and showed Lim the previous night's footage, all of it. He scrolled back to 3:30 a.m. The motion-triggered video at 3:34 a.m. was there. But before that, at 3:33 a.m., there should have been another clip. The camera captured everything on the porch, including any motion before someone reached the door. But there was nothing. The previous video was from 11:52 p.m., showing a cat walking past. Then a gap. Then the 3:34 a.m. clip of the figure entering. Lim frowned. So the camera didn't detect motion until the person was already at the door. That's not how it works, Marcus said. It has a wide field. It should have caught them coming up the walkway, crossing the yard, but it's like they just appeared at the door. The tech checked the camera itself, examined its angle and range. Everything was functioning correctly. They tested it, walking up to the door from different angles. Every approach triggered the camera at least 15 feet out. There was no blind spot. No way to reach the door without being recorded earlier in the approach. Unless the figure hadn't approached. Unless they'd simply been there at the door instantly at 3:34:17 a.m. Lim requested the video file again, sent it to the same forensic analyst. Same result. Authentic, unaltered, no explanation. She expanded her investigation. She interviewed Marcus's coworkers, his ex-girlfriend, his neighbors. She was looking for anyone who might have a motive to terrorize him, anyone with access to his routines or his schedule. She found nothing. Marcus was well-liked, boring even. No enemies, no drama, no debts. The ex-girlfriend lived in Durham, had a solid alibi for both nights, and seemed genuinely concerned when Lim interviewed her. She said Marcus was stable, rational, maybe a little obsessive about work, but not someone who'd fabricate something like this. Lim checked with Ring's technical support, asked if there was any known glitch that could cause footage to appear timestamped from a time when the device owner wasn't present, or that could duplicate a user's image from archived footage. They said no. She asked if the device could be hacked, if someone could upload false footage to his account. They said theoretically possible but highly unlikely, and it would leave digital traces. There were no traces. She stood in Marcus's house on the afternoon of April 23rd, looking at him across the kitchen table and said, "I don't know what to tell you. Everything we're finding says this is real, but it can't be real." Marcus asked, "What if it happens again?" She said, "Then we'll have more data." It happened again. April 25th, 1:58 a.m. Same video, same figure, same 6 seconds. Marcus was asleep upstairs. The notification woke him. He watched the video. He didn't go downstairs this time. He sat in his bed, listening, waiting for footsteps, for the sound of someone moving through his house. But there was nothing, just silence. He texted Lim the video. She didn't respond until morning. When she called, she sounded tired in a way that wasn't about sleep. She said, "I'm bringing in someone from the FBI. This is beyond what we can handle locally." The FBI's involvement started on April 27th. Special Agent Donovan, a digital crimes investigator from the Charlotte field office, reviewed the case file and the videos. He focused on the technical side, working under the assumption this was some form of cyber harassment or identity fraud. He pulled Marcus's digital footprint, social media, email accounts, cloud storage, purchase history. He found nothing suspicious. He examined the Ring device's firmware, looked for signs of remote access or tampering. Clean. He interviewed Ring's engineers. They couldn't explain it either. Donovan requested access to Marcus's house for a full technical sweep. On April 29th, a team installed motion sensors in every room, additional cameras covering all entry points and audio recording devices. They were going to monitor the house 24/7 for any anomaly. Marcus agreed to it, even though it meant living under surveillance in his own home. He said he didn't care anymore. He just wanted it to stop. For 6 days, nothing happened. The house was quiet. The new cameras recorded nothing unusual. Marcus went to work, came home, ate, watched TV, went to bed. Normal life. He started to think maybe the FBI's presence had ended it, that whoever or whatever was doing this had been scared off by the escalation. On May 5th at 2:47 a.m., every camera in the house went offline simultaneously. Not the doorbell camera that stayed active, but every device the FBI had installed cut out. The motion sensors stopped transmitting. The audio recorders went dead. The FBI team monitoring remotely saw the feeds drop and immediately dispatched agents to the house. They arrived in 14 minutes. The cameras came back online at 3:02 a.m. just as the agents pulled up. Marcus was asleep through all of it. The agents woke him, asked if he'd heard anything, noticed anything. He hadn't. They reviewed the footage. There was nothing. Just a 15-minute black gap across all devices except the doorbell camera. The doorbell footage showed nothing during that window, no motion, no activity. But when the FBI techs examined the equipment, they found something strange. The cameras hadn't lost power. They hadn't been disabled physically. The data logs showed they'd continued running. They just hadn't recorded anything. 15 minutes of operational time with zero output. No error codes. No explanation. And when they checked Marcus's bedroom, the bed looked slept in on both sides. Marcus slept alone. He always had. The left side of his bed, the side he never used, had a depression in the pillow, the sheet pulled back the same way as the right side. The agents asked him if he'd moved during the night, if he'd rolled over or gotten up. He said no. He'd fallen asleep on his right side and woke up on his right side. He never touched the left side. They photographed it. They dusted for prints. Marcus's fingerprints were on the nightstand on the left side, on the lamp he never used, on the pillowcase. He stood there looking at the evidence of himself in a place he'd never been and felt something crack inside his chest. That specific kind of terror that isn't about something chasing you or hurting you. It's about the ground disappearing. It's about not being able to trust the most basic fact, that you know where you are and what you've done. Keep this in mind, because what happened next is why this case ended up sealed, why most of the people involved won't go on record, and why I'm telling this story in the dark instead of in daylight where things make sense. On May 8th, 3 days after the camera blackout, Marcus's neighbor, a woman named Prithai who lived 2 houses down, knocked on his door in the early evening. She looked uncomfortable. She asked if everything was okay, if he'd been having any issues with his house. Marcus asked why. She said she'd seen him coming and going at strange hours, that her teenage son had mentioned seeing Marcus leave the house at 4 a.m. a few days prior, and then again the next morning at his usual time, like he'd never left. Marcus told her he hadn't left his house at 4 a.m. He'd been asleep. She looked at him for a long moment, then said, "Okay, I just wanted to check," and left. But he could see in her face she didn't believe him. He called Detective Lim. She came over that evening and interviewed Prithai and her son. The son, 17 years old, said he'd seen Marcus walking down Oberlin Road toward the main street at around 4:10 a.m. on May 6th. He'd been up late playing video games and had glanced out his window when he heard footsteps. He recognized Marcus. They'd talked a few times when Marcus was out checking his mail. He was wearing the same North Face jacket he always wore. The kid was certain. Lim asked if he could have been mistaken, if maybe it was someone else. The kid said no, it was definitely him. But Marcus had been home. The FBI's motion sensors inside the house showed no movement toward the front door at that time. The doorbell camera showed no one leaving. The new external cameras the FBI had placed showed no one exiting the property. But a witness had seen him, a credible witness with no reason to lie. Lim stood in Marcus's living room and said, "I don't know how to write this report." Marcus said, "Then don't." But she had to. The case file was growing. More people were getting involved. And the question everyone was starting to ask, quietly, in ways they hoped no one else would hear, was whether Marcus Webb was somehow in 2 places at once, or whether something was using his image, his identity, his physical presence in ways that violated everything they understood about reality. Agent Donovan requested a medical evaluation. Marcus agreed. On May 11th, he underwent a full psychological assessment, a neurological exam, and an MRI. They were looking for signs of dissociative identity disorder, seizures, brain lesions, anything that could cause fugue states or explain gaps in his memory. The results came back clean. Neurologically, psychologically, he was fine. The psychologist's report noted that Marcus presented as anxious and sleep-deprived, understandable given the circumstances, but showed no signs of psychosis, delusion, or fabrication. Her conclusion: patient appears to be experiencing genuine distress related to unexplained events. No evidence of malingering or psychiatric disorder. So if Marcus wasn't fabricating and the videos weren't faked, and the witnesses weren't lying, then what was happening? On May 14th, Marcus's ex-girlfriend Jenna called him. She'd heard about what was going on through a mutual friend. She asked if he was okay. He said he didn't know. She asked if he remembered the last few weeks they'd been together, back in Durham the previous summer. He said of course. She said, "Do you remember that weekend I thought you came over when you were supposed to be in Charlotte?" Marcus went cold. He asked her to explain. She said it was in August, almost 9 months ago. Marcus had told her he was driving to Charlotte for a work thing, staying overnight. She'd said okay, told him to be safe. But the next morning, around 6 a.m., she'd woken up and thought she'd heard his voice in her living room. She lived alone, had given Marcus a key months earlier. She got up, went to check, and saw the front door closing. Like someone had just left. She called his cell. He answered from Charlotte groggy, said he'd just woken up and was about to head back. She asked if he'd come by her place. He said no. She let it go, figured she'd been half asleep and imagined it. But later, when she checked her doorbell camera, she had one too back then. There was a clip from 5:52 a.m. showing someone entering her apartment with a key. Someone who looked exactly like Marcus. She'd convinced herself it was him, that he'd driven back early to surprise her and then left before she fully woke, and just didn't want to admit it for some reason. She never brought it up again. Marcus didn't remember this. He'd never gone to Jenna's that morning. He'd been in Charlotte. He asked her if she still had the video. She said no, her camera had broken a month later and she'd lost the cloud storage when she canceled the subscription. But she remembered it. She remembered watching it and feeling confused, and then just deciding to forget about it because it didn't make sense. Marcus hung up and sat in his kitchen staring at nothing. This had happened before, 9 months ago, and he hadn't known. He went back through his memories, his calendar, trying to find other moments where time felt wrong or where someone had mentioned seeing him when he knew he'd been elsewhere. There was a moment in March. A coworker had made a joke about seeing him at a grocery store late on a Sunday night, but Marcus had been home watching a movie. He'd laughed it off, figured the coworker was mistaken. There was a parking ticket he'd received in January for his car being parked in a 2-hour zone in downtown Raleigh for 4 hours on a Tuesday afternoon. He'd contested it because he'd been in a meeting at work all afternoon, nowhere near downtown. The ticket had been dismissed due to lack of evidence, but the timestamp on the parking enforcement photo had definitely shown his car. His license plate, his exact model. How long had this been happening? On May 18th, Detective Lim's lieutenant pulled her off the case. Not officially, but in the way that departments do when something stops making sense and starts making them look bad. He told her to wrap up her reports, file what she had, and move on. There was no crime being committed that they could define. No one was getting hurt. Marcus wasn't pressing charges because there was no one to charge. The lieutenant said, "Sometimes things don't have answers and we don't have the resources to chase ghosts." Lim hated it, but she complied. She filed her final report on May 19th. The language was careful, sterile. Investigation inconclusive. Evidence suggests unusual technical anomalies with surveillance equipment and possible misidentification by witnesses. No indication of criminal activity or threat to subject. Case closed pending new evidence. Continue. 2336. Agent Donovan's FBI file was more detailed but reached the same dead end. He noted the timestamps, the forensic analysis, the witness statements, and concluded with a line that probably got him questioned by his supervisors. Unable to determine mechanism of observed phenomena. Recommend ongoing monitoring for pattern expansion. Pattern expansion. He thought this might happen to other people. Marcus lived in his house for another 3 weeks. The videos stopped after May 5th. No more doorbell notifications, no more figures that looked like him. But he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, or worse, that he was watching himself and didn't know it. He started noticing small things. A coffee cup in the sink that he didn't remember using, the thermostat adjusted to a temperature he never set, a book on his nightstand open to a page he hadn't reached yet. Little things. Explainable things, but they accumulated. He stopped sleeping well. He'd lie in bed and stare at the ceiling and wonder if there was another version of himself somewhere else, living a parallel routine, making different choices, or if something had latched onto him. Something that could wear his face and use his hands and walk through the world as him, while he was asleep or distracted or just living his normal life. The idea was so destabilizing that he couldn't hold on to it for long. It would slip through his thoughts like water. In early June, Marcus put in for a transfer. His company had an office in Denver. He told his supervisor he needed a change of scenery, that the pandemic isolation was getting to him. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth. He was approved by mid-June. He packed his things, hired movers, and left Raleigh on June 28, 2020. I helped him load the last few boxes into his car. He looked exhausted but relieved. He said, "I don't know what that was, but I'm not staying to find out if it comes back." I asked him if he thought it was over. He said, "I don't think it was ever about the house." He drove away. I watched his car disappear down Oberlin Road and felt a strange sense of loss, like something had shifted in the neighborhood, in the street itself. A few days later, a new tenant moved into Marcus's old house. A young couple. I thought about warning them, but what would I even say? Sometimes the previous tenant appeared on video when he wasn't home. They'd think I was insane. I kept an eye on the house anyway. Nothing seemed wrong. The couple was friendly, normal. They stayed for 4 months and then moved out suddenly in October. I ran into the woman at the grocery store a few weeks later and asked casually how they liked the house. She gave me a strange look and said, "It was fine, but we kept having issues with the doorbell camera. It would go off in the middle of the night for no reason, just showing an empty porch. We thought it was broken." She didn't say anything else, and I didn't ask. In December 2020, I got a message from Marcus. He'd settled in Denver, was doing okay, hadn't had any more incidents. But he'd started researching cases like his, digging through internet forums and unsolved mystery databases. He found 17 other reports, not documented officially, but mentioned in passing on paranormal and tech forums, of people being recorded by their own security systems when they weren't home. Different cities, different years. Most of them dismissed as hoaxes or equipment glitches. But the details were consistent. Motion-activated cameras showing the homeowner entering their residence at odd hours, always at night, always when the real person had an alibi. In a few cases, neighbors had reported seeing the person during those times. In one case from Oregon in 2018, a man's doorbell camera recorded him entering his apartment at 3 a.m. while he was hospitalized after a car accident, unconscious in a hospital bed 40 miles away. The hospital confirmed his presence. The timestamp confirmed the video. No one ever explained it. Marcus said in his message, "I don't think I'm the first. I don't think I'll be the last." I asked him if he'd contacted any of the other people. He said he'd tried. Most of them didn't want to talk about it. One woman he reached from a case in Ohio in 2019 told him she'd moved 3 times since it happened, and it followed her to each place. She said the videos stopped eventually, but she still feels like she's being duplicated somewhere, like there's another version of her out there making choices she'll never know about. She said, "You spend your whole life assuming you're one person in one body in one place. But what if that's not true? What if we're not as singular as we think?" Marcus didn't have an answer for that. Neither do I. In March 2021, Marcus sent me a final message. He said the videos had started again. Not on his doorbell camera. He didn't have one in Denver. But a building security camera in his apartment complex had captured him entering the lobby at 4:17 a.m. on March 9th. He'd been in his apartment, asleep. The building manager had emailed him the clip, asking if he'd lost his keys and used the emergency entrance because the timestamp didn't match the keycard logs. Marcus didn't respond to the manager. He told me he was thinking about getting rid of all cameras, all recording devices. He said, "Maybe if I'm not being watched, it can't happen." I haven't heard from him since. I still live on Oberlin Road. The house Marcus rented has had 4 different tenants in the past 4 years. None of them stay long. The current tenant is a grad student. I see him sometimes taking out trash or checking his mail. He looks tired. A few weeks ago, I saw a police car parked outside his place late at night. I don't know what it was about. I didn't ask. Sometimes I think about what Detective Lim said. Sometimes things don't have answers. But I don't think that's true. I think things always have answers. We just don't want to hear them. Because if Marcus's story is real, and I believe it is, then it means we're not the solid, singular beings we think we are. It means identity can be peeled away, copied, worn by something else. It means the face you see in the mirror might be looking back at you from somewhere else entirely, living a life you're not aware of, making choices in your name. And if that's possible, then what does it mean to be you? I don't know who's listening to this at this hour, but if you've made it this far, then you already sense that some stories don't end. They just stop being told. Marcus's case file is still technically open in Raleigh PD's system, buried under 100 other cases, marked inactive. The FBI's file is sealed. Agent Donovan transferred to a different field office in 2022. Detective Lim retired early last year. The forensic analyst who examined the videos requested a transfer to a different department and won't talk about the case. And Marcus Webb is somewhere, maybe Denver, maybe somewhere else by now, trying to live a normal life while knowing that somewhere, on some camera he'll never see, a version of him is walking up to a door he's never been to, using a key he's never held, entering a space he's never occupied. The doorbell camera recorded him coming home, but he was never there. And the question no one wants to ask, the question that sits at the center of this whole thing like a weight in cold water, is this: if the recording shows him, if the witnesses see him, if his fingerprints are on the glass and his warmth is in the sheets, then who's to say which version is real? Maybe Marcus is still in that hotel in Greensboro, asleep, dreaming this life. Maybe the version I knew, the version who lived 4 houses down, was the copy all along. Maybe we're all recordings of ourselves, playing on a loop, and sometimes the camera captures the signal bleeding through from another channel. I don't know. But I do know this: I installed a doorbell camera last month, and last week at 2:11 a.m. I got a notification. Motion detected at front door. I was in bed. I opened the app. The video loaded. 6 seconds. A figure approaching from the left. My jacket, my walk, my face. I haven't watched it again. I deleted the app. I took the camera down, but the notification is still in my email. I could open it right now if I wanted. I could see myself standing at my own door, key in hand, about to enter. But I don't want to know if I did. Some stories don't get told unless someone is actually here to hear them. And some doors, once you see yourself walk through them, you can never close again. I'm Gen Z, and you were listening to SKM Horror Story. We'll meet again on another night. Until then, don't turn the lights off.